Okay, so what I'm going to do just to begin is I'm going to repeat the last thing that we did, which, because we were kind of rushing a little bit, and that is how to do drop-down menus. And I wanted to be able to add a little bit more detail too, and then at that point we'll go on and do some additional stuff. Okay? So, actually, I don't think I muted. Okay, that'll quiet things down a little bit. Okay, so in order to create a drop-down menu, there are actually two ways that you can do this, and you have to go to the same places. And as I had mentioned before, the first thing you got to do is make sure that you actually have the Data tab in your menu. Now, I'm on a Mac today, so the menus may look slightly different. So if you do it on a PC, you actually have to go to the end. It's a little different on the Mac, and make sure that under Custom Ribbon, you've selected Data. If you have it already, you don't have to worry about it, but if you don't have it and you're wondering where is it, that's where it is, okay? And can I pull down the screen a little bit? Yeah, I think so. Hold on. I can't see the top tabs. Try widening your screen because it seems to be coming out here correctly. And I'm monitoring, so I'll see. I'm not sure I can bring the top down, okay? How's that? Is that a little better? Okay. Okay, good. Let me know if it goes off the screen again. I'll try to do it. Okay, so you have to go to Data. And actually, in this case, it's the Data up top. Data Validation List. And it's the same on the Mac and PC. So I'll just repeat it again so you can see it. It's Data Validation List. And what you're going to do is go to List. And there are two options. One of the ways is you can simply enter the item. So I'll kind of take you through the most basics and add some details. So if I do apples, oranges, and pears, and then I hit OK, I got to remember where I was, actually. Let me do it again. So Data Validation List, and I'll do apples, oranges, pears. And what you're going to notice is once you do that, you get a little bar, like a drop-down bar. Now, you'll only see it if you're actually in the cell. And then you're going to get a choice, apples, oranges, or pears. Now, if you notice, I went to the cell. That doesn't mean that you couldn't copy them. You can copy them down. Apples and oranges and pears. Okay, so one of the challenges here, the way I set it up, is there's no way to turn it back to blank. So I'm kind of stuck with our apples, oranges, and pears. So if I want to do this again, it's kind of not terribly helpful. So I want to show you a way that you can kind of work around that if you're going to be entering the items manually as opposed to giving a range. So I'm going to, by the way, if you ever want to edit an item, you just go into that cell again and repeat the process. So you go Data Validation, and it's going to open up the item. So you just repeat. And what you want to do, you can't just put a blank in the front. It won't accept it. But what Excel will let you do, and it's kind of unique to Excel, is if you put a dash and any word, it doesn't really matter what word, and then another dash and a comma, it will treat that item as like a choice. So you'll see what I mean. Up top in the list is select, and that'll blank. Now, it's not the word that select that really is the determinant. It's the fact that you have any word between dashes. In fact, I probably could just have the two dashes. So just to show you that, if I go back into it again, and instead of doing select, I do, I don't know, choose or pick, it'll still work. So it really hasn't, you got to do it right. Okay. So it doesn't really matter what the word is, it's just that it's separated around two dashes. Okay, any questions on that? Everybody okay? This is how I know you're alive. Okay, so now there is another way that I could do this. The way I did it here was I actually entered the items manually, and that's okay if you have like a little list. But what if I have a very, very long list, like a list of names of employees, etc.? Is there another way to do it? And the answer is yes. The other way that I can do it is to have like an array or a range of cells, like apples, oranges, pears. And so now what I can do here is, if I wanted to, say, create a menu over here, I go to Data Validation List, and instead of entering the items, I go to the corner where it says Range, and I'm going to show you a little trick. I pick the range of the cell above, which is a blank cell. And now I press Enter. When I do that, you'll notice we learned before about absolute reference. So notice it's setting it as absolute reference, so if I copy it down, it's going to still refer to the same range. It's not going to move it. And now look what happens when I do here. I've got a blank up top because it's referring to this cell. And just to show you that, if I put something in it, then it'll now be cherries. So if I want to do it using a range, I simply do it one cell above, and I leave that cell blank, and that can accomplish the same thing. All right, everybody okay on that? We're good? Now, sometimes you can use it for fun stuff, or you don't have to automatically assume that you're going to be using Word. Sometimes I did and I'll actually show it to you in a minute. I'm going to show you like an extreme use of all of these drop-downs that's not a computational use, okay? And that is, here I have like a list of ratings. Like I'm going to rate, is it 1-star, 2-star, 3-star? So all I would have to do is go here, go Data Validation List. And here I'm not going to worry about one above, because really these are the only choices. I'm going to hit Enter. I'm going to confirm. And now, okay, you got 1-star, you got 2-star, depending on how you did. This is a 3-star rating, this is a 4-star rating. So there are other ways that you can use it. You could even use it for like yes or no, or a checkbox, unchecked box. So I thought before we go on, I would just, and this, by the way, I gave you this in the template, so you can certainly play with it. But I had a district that requested that I try to develop an observation instrument for teachers. And it's an interesting observation instrument. It was more a sample. I don't think I would have gone so over the top with so many things here if it were not, just to show you all of what you could do. Okay? So what I've done here is each line is an event. So on the first line, it's just a date. You enter the date. Fractions, that's just a text. But here, it was a question. Did they have a do now or not? And if you do, it's either yes or no. If they didn't have one, you do a no. If it's yes, it's a yes. And then on this item, it's a rating. So depending on how well they did, I could have given them anywhere from a 1 to a 3, or a 5, or a 6. This was a comment, so that's just a regular type-in. Here, it's a rubric, so it's depending on different scores. It could either be none, or weak, or moderate, or strong. And here again, I've got another one where it's a different drop-down based on, what we're doing based on the instrument. And here again. So some of them are text and some of them are drop-down. So here's an easy way to kind of, quickly if I have to input information. And what's interesting about this is there's a mobile version of Excel that works on an iPad or on an Android tablet. And although you can't create the drop-downs on it, if you create them on the Mac or PC and you save the file, you can do them on it. So I've had some situations where I've worked on projects for people where they're coming in to do stuff like an inspection on a tablet, and they're able to use the drop-downs to make their choices on the tablet, even though you couldn't actually create it on the tablet. So any questions on that? Now, by the way, if you want to see what all of this is, here are my arrays. So here, this for some reason it shows it strangely here. I think it's more the formatting of the text. I'm going to try again. Yeah, it's because it's in Zingbats. For the dots, yeah. But these are like the stars. It just kind of changed on the edit. But here's my stars. Here's the highly effective. Here's the different choices. And these are the yes and no's. I think that just is, again, it changed it. Those are the check or X. So the first thing I do is make my various items, and then I enter them in. And so you could do it one of two ways. I have a couple of situations where people are putting in all of the names of everybody in their department for some sort of a routing thing, and they can easily select the names. So any questions, anything you want me to go over again on that? Or is everybody good? Okay, good. All right, on to our next adventure. I don't think I did this with you last time I checked. Okay, I didn't do anything with you over dates last time. I want to talk to you about dates in Excel for a minute and how you can use them. So you're all familiar with, and you've seen dates in Excel. You'll see like 1, 3, 17, you get a date. What many of you may not know is that Excel treats a date as a number. That in fact, a date is essentially like a format, like general or percent, and there's a number that it represents. And the easy way to see that is if you gotta go to home. If you go to home, and I'll just pull it down so you can see it. Actually, you should be able to see it. It's my screen that's blocked. Okay. If you go here, you'll see over here it says date. If you change that to general, you're going to get a number, 42,738. So if you've ever wondered, or you wonder what that number is, let me explain what it is, because it's important to know. Excel was developed originally from Lotus. It's kind of ported from Lotus 1.2.3, so some of the formatting kind of even predates Excel. But one of the things was there was a recognition that if we wanted to be able to count days between dates, we had to have a way of representing it in numbers. So by way of default, or by the way it was established, it was decided that, and again, you got to bear in mind this was the 1980s, that we would start at 1/1/1900. And 1/1/1900 would represent 1. And then every day after that would be an additional day. So just to show you that and prove that, if I pick 1/1/1900, look what I get. Well, I have to reformat. That's important. I get 1. And if I did 1/2/1900, that would be 2. Okay? So as much as I hate to do this, I am going to put in my birthday. So, and you all can guess how old I am. We could actually figure it out. Okay, so now that's my birthday. So if I wanted to know how many days from 1900 there were from my birthday, all I would have to do is change it to general, and that tells me that date. That tells me what my number is. That's my birth date number, okay? Now, interestingly enough, if I wanted to know how many days old I was, all I would have to do, there's another horrible thought, okay? All I would have to do is take today's date, convert it, and you really actually don't have to convert it. I just want you to see it. Convert that to a number, right? And all I have to do is take the difference between them. And I am 22,142 days old. Okay? Any questions? Now you're wondering, what do you do with that? Okay? Aside from trivia. Well, there's an awful lot of uses. And let me show you. If you're dealing with anything where you need to be able to tell the difference between today's date and a previous date, it can be very helpful. So here's an example. Just earlier this week, Well, I'll give you the simplest one. If I wanted to know how long library cards had been out at my library, I'm sorry, not library cards. Library cards are out, but how long library books have been out at my library, I'm going to give you some dates when the books were borrowed, okay? And I'm just making up random dates. But let's say we have 11/3/16, we have 10, these people are really bad, 10/5/16, we have 1/11/16, 17, and we have, something a little bit more recent, 2/5/17. These are my dates, right? So now, if I wanted to tell the difference, how long these books are all outstanding, I can put in today, okay, which is 2/16/17, and I can copy it down because it's not going to change. And I don't have to change the format to do this. I can leave it in the format it's in and simply go, you always want to pick the later date when you're doing these, minus the earlier date, and that's 105 days old. And then I can simply copy down, and I can see this one's out 105 days, that one's out 135 days, this one's out 14 days. So this is called aging, and it's done with a lot of things. It can be done with library books. We've even done it on, how long money is owed. For example, if you're responsible for collecting tuition, you want to know how many days it's outstanding, you can do that. If people owe you money, we even use it for work orders in facilities to determine how long it's been since a request was put in to when it was completed, or how many of them are out. Then we try to look at why it's taking so long. Okay, any questions on that so far before I go further and show you a few more details? Everybody clear? So it's a pretty simple idea. Everybody got it? Any questions? Want me to do it again? Okay, how many of you were familiar with this? Did you know it already? I'm always curious to know if I should add. Okay. All right, so let me show you one more thing that's kind of really cool about this, if you didn't know it already. Okay? Okay. So I entered the date manually. But there's another function. It's actually a great function. It's called the equals today function. And I'll just start with the function first. Okay, it's called equals today. And it has no parameters. So it's basically equals today plus open parentheses, close parentheses. And if you enter that formula and you hit enter, what you're going to get is today's date. So you're saying, well, I could have entered that date. What's the big deal? The big deal is this. This date comes off the clock of the computer. So if I do equal today, and I copy it down, and I'll do again the whole thing just so you get a chance to see it again, If I open this very same spreadsheet tomorrow, the date will automatically be 2/17. I will not have to enter a new date because it's always based on today's date. So if I'm keeping an ongoing track of stuff, I don't have to keep changing up to today's date. It'll automatically be every time I open the report. Any questions on that one? Can you see the use? So again, here's just another example of ones I had already done before and ones that were already here. By the way, you can also use it another way. If you have a date, you can add, and then it'll give you another date. So for example, if I don't do this as often, but you can do it. If I did today's date, and here I said, I want to know what 11 days is from now. I could also total them. Now, it's interesting. It picked up that it was formatted as a date. Sometimes I may get a number. I may have to go back and and change the format to date. But either way, it's going to then tell me what's 11 days in the future. So if you have a situation where you need to let someone know when something is due or calculate it that way, you can do that way as well. Okay? And again, here's just some examples of where I'm comparing the issue date to a payment date, so I'm determining times between dates. And here again, another one. Now, the only thing I'm going to show you here that's a little bit different, and it's a little bit more advanced, is maybe I only wanted to show it if it's unpaid. So here, I didn't put a column for date. I simply put it one spot, and that's today's date. But I put in an if statement that said the following: if it's unpaid, show it as blank. Otherwise, calculate the difference between the days, because I don't want, if an item's been paid, I don't need it here. And just to make it even more fancy, I used a drop-down menu, so my choice was either paid or not, or blank. So if the item's paid, notice what it does. It leaves the cell blank. If it's unpaid, it's going to show it. So that may be a little bit more advanced for some of you, and if we come back, we'll do some additional logical if statements. But I'm just trying to show you that there's kind of, you can do a little bit fancier job on this. Any questions on that so far? We're good? All right. Okay, so now we get to something kind of, I'm not going to teach you all the date functions, but I want to show you this other one because it's kind of weird, but it has some uses, especially if you work in human resources areas, okay? So one of the other date functions, besides just being able to calculate the day, is a function called the date function. And the basic thing of the date function is there's an equal year, there's an equal month, there's an equal day. So if you have any date, if you need to rip out the year or rip out the month or rip out the day, you can do that. So I'll show you how you would do that. I'm just going to pick a date at random, let's say 4/16, the one I had there, 16. And what I would do is now go equals year. And refer to that cell. And it's just going to give me the year. Well, why might I need this? Suppose I needed to know the year that someone was retiring, right? And I've got this date, and I don't want to re-enter it. So I do equal year, and let's say they retire in 40 years. So I can simply go over here and go equals 40, and now I've got the year they're retiring. And I could have actually even done it all in one formula. I could have done it here and just done plus 40, and that would have given me when they're retiring. Okay? This, by the way, it gave me that as a number. So what I would have to do is change it to a date. And there you go, you got the date. I don't know why I'm getting a different date on each. Okay? Let me check it. I'm just going to put a parentheses around it. Should work. I should get the date. There we go. Oh, okay. Let's see. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. Oh, there it goes. Okay, so let's see. I got the year. Oh, gave us the times. That's why. Let's try that. There we go. Okay, that's right. Okay, any questions? You added 4 to the original cell. Thank you. Somebody got to make me honest. All right, we good? Right, as opposed to the 19 to the 2016. Thank you for keeping me honest. All right, any questions on that? All right. So anything you want me to go over on dates? I mean, I could certainly do more on dates, but I think that gives you a rough idea of a few of the date things. The most common one I use is just the numbers between the dates. Okay? We're good? You got to give me feedback, otherwise I don't know. I feel lonely. You know how that is. Okay. All right. Next thing. So I have in front of me a table. And I only say it's a table because of the way the information is laid out. Okay? And what this is actually a table I developed for someone. I'll make it a little smaller so you can see it. It's actually for a transportation department, and it was an incident report. So each event, each line, is what they call a transaction. By the way, we can use the same data when we do the pivot table, okay? So it's one of the data sets I have for the pivot table, which I want to show you. But before we even do pivots, I want to show you something even simpler than that, which for a lot of people may even be more useful and more helpful. Okay, so what makes this transaction data is each single event is on one row. The definition of transaction data is the different attributes are by columns, and each event is a row. If you don't have the data sorted that way, you can't do a pivot table, okay? That's so it's not data that's good for a pivot table, so this is perfect for a pivot table, okay? But we're not going to do a pivot table first, we're just going to do a regular table, okay? And so what I want to do is I'm going to highlight all of the cells in my table, and I made it a little easier to see where the table begins and ends by, in advance, having colored it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Insert, and I'm just going to hit Table like you were going to create a table. And it's going to ask me, is that the range, and is there a table header? And the answer is yes, because I put my titles in the range. If I had started here and didn't have my titles in the range, and I had them above the range, then I would not select this. But it automatically assumes your top row is not a data set, it's the titles. Is that clear? Okay, so what you're going to notice here, and it's kind of a little hard to see, so I'm going to fix the colors a bit, okay? Just the colors of the cells. I think we'll go to, let's try that. I think I got to change all the text in each one, so let me do it that way. I may have to do them individually. I apologize. There we go. Just so you can see it better. Oh, I don't know what's going on. It's like not changing them. I change them and then they change back. Okay. Welcome to my world. Now, there probably was a faster way of doing this. What happened again? Oh, I don't know. All right, you know what? I'll change them as I go along. Okay. Hold on. I got one more idea. There we go. I'll just change the colors of the table. There we go. To a different color scheme. And we'll go to that. Let's see, did that work? It should have picked it up. I don't know why. And it isn't what I want to talk about, so I'm going to move on in a minute anyway. All right, let's try that. All right, I quit. I'm done. All right, so let's continue, and I'll color them in as I go along. I got a better idea. That's a better idea. Oh, if you can't raise a bridge, lower the river. All right, everybody can see him now? All right. Yeah, I figured out one way or the other. All right. So, if you notice, once you turn it into a table, you're going to have these little setting bars. And they actually give you a lot of choices. So one of the things is they allow you to sort. So for example, if I want, and you can sort a couple of different ways, I'll show you. So let's say I want to sort by driver. All I have to do is go to ascending order, and it's going to give me them all by driver. And you'll notice I have all the Amy Garbers up front. Now, in addition to that, yeah, don't worry about that. That's just telling me to update. Okay. In addition to that, instead of doing ascending, what I could have done is said I only want to look at certain drivers. So suppose I wanted a report that only involved, the 3 of the drivers. So I could simply, the easiest way is actually to take them all out and then pick the ones you want. So if I only wanted these 3 drivers, I've now got a report for those 3 drivers. So again, if instead of drivers this was buildings or which program you're in, you could easily just sort the data. And you can always tell if you're not seeing all the data, because instead of getting a little triangle bar, what tells you, you get a thing that looks like a sorting. Okay? And if you select all, it should take it out, and you'll just get a regular sort. And then again, you can do descending instead, or ascending, but I can select anyone from the list. So that's like a 1-column sort. But one of the beautiful things about this is you can also do a multi-column sort. And it always begins with the first column you selected. So I started with all my drivers. I can now sort those by incident. Actually, it's the last one. I'd have to then, and then I could go in and just do the ones for Amy by incident. Actually, the easiest one, again, is to take that out. And now I've got a report. These are all the ones for Amy by incident. Any questions? Everybody good? How many of you do this now? Good. So I find this really, really helpful. A lot of times I've got a lot of data, but I only really need small pieces. Like I've got all the data for all my divisions or all the data for all my programs, and instead of trying to, just kind of sort out, I'll just use the table and then subset what I need by being able to select. Okay. You want me to show that to you again, or you good? It's fairly easy. Okay? All you do is select, you do insert table, and then you've got the bars. Okay? So again, how many of you were doing that before? Were using that before? Anybody? Okay, good. Good. Okay. So I'm actually going to go and undo it all. There are actually easier ways of doing this, but I'll just do it quicker. There we go. Okay, so another way to do this, or a little bit more advanced way, and I want to make sure that I do pivot tables first because I kind of promised pivot tables, so I don't want to end up running out of time, okay? So I do want to show you how to do a pivot table instead. So same idea, same data set. You must have the data in this format. So there are certain conditions. Can't have blank items, and you got to have all the items in column or data for the different topics, and each item must be a different event, which could be anything from a check to a student register to an incident, whatever it happens to be. And so once again, I'm going to select the table. And I'm going to go to Insert, but this time, instead of going to Table, I'm going to go to Pivot Table. And again, Table's over here, Pivot Table is over here. You can do a recommended pivot. It'll try to guess but I usually just do pivot table, and then at that point, I would design it myself. So when you do a pivot table, the first thing it asks is, what's the table? And then does it say, do you want it in the same worksheet or a different worksheet? Do you want it side by side? It's almost always a better idea to put it in a different worksheet. So what it's going to do is actually create an additional sheet down below. And in this case, it's sheet 1. I can then at that point rename it. I can call it my pivot, for bus, but it's going to create it. And when it does, it's going to give you this little, what's called a pivot table builder. And what you're going to notice is you've got all of those columns, just so you can compare. I'll go back. I always like to go back to my original data so you can see where it's coming from. All of these columns, all of these were the original columns in that, if I can find it again, in my table, the table for sorting. See, so this date number, that is equivalent to pivot for bus. Okay? Now, one way to make sure that you don't have any errors, because the one thing that's going to mess up your pivot table, I'm just giving you some warnings so you don't run into some problems, is you're going to run into trouble with your pivot tables if you've got items that look similar. So, for example, if I go back to the table and I have John Choi and I have John Choi with a plus, they may show up as two different items. Or if one is spelled John Choi with an I and the other's with an A, it's going to mess me up. So one way to make sure that your pivot is good is to go back to your pivot and pick drivers and just move this over to row. I'll explain that after. See where it's showing up. It's probably over the end. Yeah, I've just got to move it over for the screen. See where I got over here? Now it's got all my drivers. So all I did was, whenever I select it, it makes some guesses. I'll show you, I'll explain later. We have enough time for me to go over this. But it's going to assume initially I just want to count. But if I want to tell it to show it to me in a row, I'm going to select a really important parameter like drivers, and what am I going to be looking for? Making sure I don't have like Garber with an E and Garber with an A. So once I make sure that my data is really good, I can do the same thing with, incident type. And again, make sure that I'm not getting any that are duplicates. Do you all understand what I mean? Where they're basically the same item but slightly spelled different? I'm not sure I understand the question. Oh, it didn't give you the names? Okay, you mean how did you know the names were there? Because what's going to happen is when you put driver, it's going to give you a count. Because anytime you select, and I probably should have explained this first, when you select any of the items, if you select an item with a number, it's going to total it. If you give an item with an item, it's going to count it. And that's just a constraint it does initially. So when I put in bus driver, it initially just gave me a count of the drivers. What I have to do is move it from where it says values over to rows, and that'll give me all of the names. So it may not have given you the names because you didn't move it over. Do you follow? Okay. Got it? Okay, so the beautiful thing about a pivot table is that you can cross-tabulate it, right? So, for example, and again, people have asked me, like, how do you do this? The answer is it's trial and error. You have to kind of learn the art of it, okay? It takes a little bit of a while, but it's so easy. easy to try. So right now I have a list of my drivers. What if I wanted to know the incidents? How many drivers had each incident, right? So all I would need to do is select the incidents, and now it's giving me all of the incidents, but it's summing them. So I don't want that. I want to change it to count. And that tells me, but that's still not that useful a piece of information. What I really want is it to look something like this, okay, where it's going to give me, actually I'm going to do it again. Not incident number, I picked the wrong one. Incident type. So it's giving me now, the reason it did the number is it assumed it was a number. I wanted to calculate it. So that's telling me the types, but it's not giving me enough detail. It's not telling me which of each incident. So what I'm going to now do is take what's count of incident and move it to columns. And then I'm going to go back to incident type again and put it into values. So I now have it as a column and as a value. So now look at the report I have. I can tell how many, Dave had 2 incidences, 1 incident involving reckless driving, another of this type. Do you follow? Now, maybe I don't like that report. Maybe I want it a little bit different, okay? So, for example, and you know, again, it's trial and error. I could just reverse them. So now I've got the drivers up top, and I've got the number of incidents by number. You follow? So that was two parameters. I could add a third parameter, okay? So I want to add whether the police were contacted. And again, sometimes you have to play with this a little bit to decide which way you want to go. But I'm not liking that. So I'm thinking I want it like this. I want driver and incident. I want driver and incident. So I have this driver, and then I have whether or not the police were contacted. Yes or no. Okay? And I want the numbers. So I'm going to go back to police contacted. I'm going to go, okay. So in this case, there were 2 where the police were contacted. There was 1 when they weren't. Okay? Got it? So you kind of just got to play with it a little bit to kind of find the report that you like, that works for what you're trying to find out. Okay? Now, let's just start with this very simple report. We're not going to deal so much. We're just going to do incident type and drivers. Okay? So I want the type on the column. How's that? Nice report? What do you think? Okay? But, you know, numbers are not always the most telling. Sometimes I want percents, because percent will give me a little bit more interesting information. Okay? So notice it's got count of incidents. What I can do to this, and again, I know I'm just going over a lot of stuff, but you're going to get the recording. Okay? So it normally assumes you want to count it, but I can also tell it to give me, to summarize it by percents. And you have to tell it which kind of percent you want. Do you want a column or do you want a row? So we're going to do both one at a time. So I want it by row. So I want to know how many incidents were from each driver of each type. And so when I do it now I have what? My percents. So 100% of the driving, actually, you know what? This is not what I wanted. I wanted it by columns. Okay? Columns would make more sense. Okay, so of all of the driving recklessly, 25% of them were these 2 drivers. Got it? And 33% of the loading or unloading was from this driver. See what I mean? Now, I can actually put in the number and the percent, and you can easily do that. All you have to do is take the same incident and once again put it back down into value. And then it'll give you one as percent and one as count. So let's play around a little bit with this report, and then I'll show you one other pivot table, one other quick pivot table. I mean, this is the basics. There are certainly some more things you can do, and I'll show you just a couple of more afterwards. Okay, so let's say I'm not liking the look of this report, okay? And you got to watch out with this percent stuff, because you never know what's going to happen to that when you move it. But let's assume that I'd rather have the incident type by drivers. So this is a little bit different kind of report. So now both of the items are under row. So I've got the driver and which type of incident they had, and then the percent gets a little weird here, but I would then get the percent that was of the total. Got it? Questions? Anything you want to see again? Okay, want to see one more pivot before we move on? Can I redo the percents? Yes, anytime. All I have to do is go to the one that was percent. I got to figure out which one it was. Okay. That's the percent, and then select normal. That's just going to give me a number. And then go back in again, and it gives me a choice. It's under show as data. Do I want percent of row or percent of column? Those are typically the one you want to do. So here, the way I've laid it out in rows, the logical one would be percent of row. Actually, I'm sorry, percent of column, because we've got all the numbers going down. So percent of column, and then I select that, and it gives me my numbers. So 7% of all the incidents were from this driver, and they were these percent of the total. Okay? Did you get that? Carlina? Yeah, you just got to play with it a little bit. I mean, no matter how many times I do it, until you do it, you're not going to get the hang of it. Okay, so we're going to look at one more table. I think I've got another table to show you. I made this table for Mississippi. It's a Mississippi table, okay? So here we are. This is the table for an auto dealer who wants to see his sales of cars, okay? So again, let's see if it meets the criteria to do a pivot table. It has date, model, year, region, sales rep, price, okay? Everybody see that? And each item, which is a sale, okay, can you guess which auto dealer this is? We'll see if you know your cars. What brand is this? Anybody? Correct. These are all Toyota models. Correct. Okay, and these are, as you know, these are what? Cities or areas in Mississippi, right? So what I do is I'm going to select my table. I'm now going to go to insert. I'm going to go pivot table. I already had named the range, so it's going to call it table run. I'm going to put it in a new sheet. I'm going to call it auto, so I remember what it is, right? And once again, if I wanted to just check it quick, I might check to see, do I have all my sales reps, right? I've got Buffett, Carter, Jones. Good, I don't see any duplicates. And then if I wanted to check regions, I could easily just drop that down to region. Okay, those are all my areas. Good, I'm good on that. And then if I wanted to check all my models, I could easily pull it down and just make sure I've got all my models. Yeah, I did it already anyway. All my models, and yeah, I don't have like 2 Corollas or 2 Camrys, so I know my data's good. Now I begin to do my what ifs. Okay, so if I wanted to know how many models were sold in each region, maybe I'll put my models on the column and I'll put my regions on the row. And now I know that I sold, I sold 3 Avalons, one in Gulfport, one in Hattiesburg, one in Woodville. Okay, and then how many I sold in each. And again, could I change these to percents? Yeah, all I have to do is go show as data and decide. Remember, we learned how to do this. We would do it what? Since now here I could have done either row or column. Let me start with columns. Percent of columns. And that tells me it was about 1 in each. So I got 33% of my Avalons was sold in each one of these locations. 100% of my Camrys, all of them were sold in one place, etc. Now, I could have done the order a little bit differently. I could have done it, and again, done percent of rows, and that's going to tell me what percent of all my cars were sold in each location. Of my Camrys were sold in each location, okay? And I do it that way. So it's by location as opposed to by car. Okay? So I have a choice of each. If I want it by count, I simply go back and do by count, by normal. And there I go, I've got my count. Now, so far I have what? I have my rows and I have my columns, but maybe I want to add one more piece of information. I want my sales rep, right? So now I'm going to put my sales reps here. So now I know which sales rep is in each location. Maybe I don't like that. I'd prefer to do model here. I could put them all in one, but so now I've got region and model and sales rep. I think I want model up here, and I want region and sales rep that way. Now notice, I have my sales rep up top, I have my region down below. Look what happens if I switch them. So now I've got my region up top and my sales below. Okay? So you do have to play with it a little bit. Okay? Now, of course, right now I have no data. So I probably want at least something on how many cars were sold. Maybe I want the price of the cars, and how many dollars I got on each car, So now I've got actually my sales per location. Okay, so we're running a little short of time. Any questions? I did want to make sure I did pivot tables because that was one of the promised ones. Any questions on this? Okay, I got one more quick thing because I do have to wrap up. We have another webinar coming up. Okay, so you see this box that says filters? That's an interesting box. Now, you can have both regions in a row and a filter. But if I switch it to filter, you'll see what will happen. Okay, so what's going to happen? As soon as I pick a filter, it gives me this extra area up top, and I can then select what region I want. So it's a lot like what we did on the first table where we could select which ones we want. So if I'm a sales manager and I want to report only for these 3 locations, I now have my report just for that. So if I want to do a filter by salesperson, I could produce a report just for that salesperson. So if I wanted to do a report for just one salesperson, like Buffett, I could now just generate a report for that one salesperson. If I wanted a report for, all my areas, I could pick by area. Okay? So it gives me a lot of flexibility. Anytime I want everything, I simply do select all, and now I've got my whole report. Okay? And again, I could move it here where I have the sales reps up top and the model down here. So it is a thing where you kind of got to play a little bit with it, Questions before we wrap up? I realize an hour goes short, but you do have a copy of my template and which has all of this in it, and you have the recording, okay? And I do want to ask you one quick question before we wrap up. I'm trying to do some planning for next year. How many of you would like more Excel if we decide to do additional sessions, which we will do? I'd like to add some more Excel. Yeah. And then one more question. How about some Google? Anybody want some Google? Like Gmail and calendar and that kind of stuff? Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Have a great day. Got to wrap up so I can go on to another webinar. Okay? Thank you.